Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hope you're having an amazing day. We're going to start this video off discussing the release date of Blackwell because there have been some very intriguing rumours when we can expect the RTX 50 series of graphics cards to be on store shelves, and this will be particularly important to you if you're in the market for a high-end graphics card this year, hint hint. And then we're going to move on to AMD because there have been a bunch of rumours concerning Granite Ridge, aka Ryzen 9000 series for the AM5 platform, concerning the performance, but also a benchmark of sorts that has been discovered. We're going to get into all of that plus more after this quick message from the sponsor of the video.
If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by WhoKeys.com, and they have an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as Home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out WhoKeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices.
So starting off with the RTX 50 series of graphics cards, as you know, Nvidia along with AMD tend to basically do a segmented launch strategy. So basically the higher end SKUs typically launch first and then they'll start to fill in the lower end GPUs later on. But there have been a number of reports online that basically speaking the RTX 40 series of cards has started to have its production limited, or at the very least there has been another variant of that rumor that Nvidia are basically telling IIBs that that's what they can expect to happen as they are starting to ramp up and prepare for the launch of Blackwell. But online there have been a couple of conflicting rumors concerning the release date. The first is that the cards are going to launch this year, and then there's another series of rumours that we can actually expect them essentially in the first half of next year, which if you're watching in the future is going to be 2025. Now, my own sources have largely pointed to the latter part of this year, but I've also had a few people who are just adamant, and they've been pretty good sources to be honest, that well, it's going to be next year that the cards are going to launch because there's basically not enough pressure on Nvidia to release this year because RDNA 5 is not going to launch this year unless there's some miracle that happens. And basically when it comes to things like, capacity at TSMC and so on, there just isn't really a need for Nvidia to do a launch this year. But anyway, there is a report that is floating around, and this report is from UDN. Now, this is being machine translated. I do want to give credit to WCCF Tech for this. As Nvidia storms into the AI business, it says, graphics card related products also continue to be introduced new products. Board card manufacturers expect Nvidia's latest RTX 50 series will be unveiled in the fourth quarter. Initially, we'll focus on the high-end 5090 and 5080, and the legal person is optimistic that the launch of Nvidia's Benign GPU refresh will help board card manufacturers ship shipments this year and will drive up average unit price ASP of the graphics card products. Now obviously that isn't necessarily indicating that we're going to see a increase in the price, to my understanding with that sentence, and it is machine translated, so well, let's just say it's a little rough around the edges, but it probably just means that new flagships are going to release. So obviously if you wanted an RTX, this is a general statement, so perhaps correct me if I'm wrong here. Do let me know in the comments if you feel differently. But I think most people who want like a 4090 or something along that lines, they probably have already bought the card at this point. And those who haven't yet jumped onto a 4090, maybe you've got like a, you're holding out with a 2080 Ti and you're pretty happy, also waiting for a monitor upgrade, or you've got like a 3090 or something like that. You just, why not just wait? And then, of course, the next generation of cards will launch. So it will be very interesting if that happens. There have been a lot of specifications online, including from myself, that are leaked, but basically it does seem that the highest end configuration could basically be up to 192 SM for GB202. However, that is, of course, not likely what's going to launch because the 5090 or what have you is going to obviously cut down the number of SMs as they typically do with any graphics card. I do think that the next generation from Nvidia will be very fast indeed, but it will be very interesting to see what the pricing is for these GPUs. I'm personally expecting, of course, that they are going to raise the price. There are a lot of rumors that we'll see a 512-bit bus, and if that is true, ouchie. So now let's move on to Granite Ridge. So the first thing that I will mention is that there is a supposed leaked image of a Ryzen 9000 chip. You can see it on screen. However, it doesn't seem that this is legitimate. Basically speaking, overclocking.com are reporting that this is actually fake. But honestly, if it is fake or whether it's real, I mean, personally, I think it probably is fake if people online are saying that it is. But let's just assume for a second that it is fake. It's not like the real chip is going to look that much different. I mean, it's not like it's going to have like Mickey Mouse ears and be 4 times the size of like a Ryzen 7000 series chip. Obviously, the sockets are pretty much the same. And you also have to worry about like mounting mechanisms and blah, blah, blah. So ultimately, consider it kind of like an artist's mock-up. Now, that's not part of the leaks that we're really going to cover, but I'm just mentioning it here because a couple of people did write to me about this and asked if I'd seen it. Yes, I have, but it probably is fake according to reports online. But 9550 Pro, also known online on Twitter as HXL, has discovered a very interesting, well, I wouldn't really call it benchmark, but basically Einstein home. Now, the interesting part about this is that the date for this, assuming it's correct, and you would assume it would be, is June of last year. Now, that's not super surprising because engineering samples do float around. Now, we have seen this ID before in shipping manifests, but if memory serves, that was a 6/12, and there was also an 8/16 if memory serves. So it's possible there is something hinky going on, but either way, the sample that we're seeing here is 8/16. That's assuming, of course, that none of this is fake and that type of stuff, which is possible. I mean, CPU IDs and, you know, we've seen, let's put it this way, it wouldn't be the first time that something like this has been faked. Now, I do want to mention just briefly some more updates to the IPC and performance stuff. Honestly, I've been sitting on, well, a bunch of Zen 5 information for a while now, but there is just so much conflicting stuff that's floating around from my sources and just online. I didn't want to put out another video kind of just focusing on IPC, but since we're talking about Ryzen 9000 anyway, I may as well throw this in here. Now, consider this stuff with super huge amounts of salt. But basically, I received Cinebench scores. Now, these figures are rounded, but basically for the 9950X, that's assuming that's what I'm assuming this processor is going to be called, but it's going to be highest end SKU, the 16 cores, 32 threads. Well, technically, I guess there's going to be the X3D chips as well, which would be the higher end SKUs. But either way, this is with 170 watt, but 170 for the single core. Multi-thread is around 3000. However, these are Cinebench 2024 results, and the figures are rounded. So, for example, 3000 could be like 3050, or it could be like high 2800, something like that. So, basically, these are ballpark results I was given. The 9900 is pretty much the same in terms of the single thread score, because obviously why wouldn't it be, but the multi-thread has been cut down to around 2200. Now, this source has generally been pretty good. However, I'm still a little skeptical about the results because, quite frankly, it's very difficult to know what is and what isn't true. I was also told that the CPU seems to be operating around 5800 to 6.1 gigahertz. Those are figures I've been told a lot of times at this point. However, I still am a little bit skeptical on the actual 6.1 gigahertz. Potentially this is Fmax or something else, or maybe it's like something that it kind of peaks at just very briefly under a very light workload. Who knows? Either way, that's what I've been told. Now, as for a second source, they told me that these results do seem to be fairly accurate, in particular the single thread performance, and they also told me that spec int, although this does seem to be the server side of things, and that's quite important as we'll get to in just a second, but they told me spec int for the server seems to be 40 to 50% faster, and this is roughly in line with Kepler L2 statements on that very same subject. And my source told me 96 core Turin is 1.5x spec int performance of a 96 core Genoa. Now, that is important because they're saying that it's actually the integer performance, and obviously that would, in theory anyway, mean that they are definitely not referring to the higher clock frequency that we can expect from Turing, simply because it's running at higher frequencies, because basically it's got higher wattage up to 500 watts. Although from the leaks online, that does seem to be a very small select number of parts, so it's going to be interesting whether that changes for the final production. Now, I will say, in terms of the IPC information, I've mentioned this before in a couple of other videos. Honestly, the number of IPC figures that I have been given is quite frankly mind-boggling. It does seem that AVX 512 is significantly better on Zen 5 for the architectural reasons that we've discussed several times in the past, so I won't belabor the point, but basically they are essentially true AVX 512 implementation now, so in theory that's going to be a lot better, and in theory anyway it could be up to 2x faster. However, I do stress the word in theory. Again, we'll have to wait and see what actually is reality when AMD release official benchmarks and we can actually start testing the chips ourselves. However, when it comes to overall IPC information, I've honestly been given so many different figures, between around 20% IPC gain over Zen 4, which would actually be very impressive. It would still be generation over generation, roughly in line with what we've seen from some of AMD's better chips like Zen 1 to Zen 2 or Zen 2 to Zen 3 and so forth. However, I've also been given much higher figures, around 30 to 35%, and some of those figures are from very good sources. Frankly, I will only believe things when we actually get solid information, because quite honestly, I don't want to get my own hopes up, if nothing else. Like, you know, 30-35% IPC gain from one generation to another is absolutely just ridiculous. Like, if it is true, and let's just hypothetically say for 1 second that it is, it would be a eureka moment for AMD. Now, what I will say is some sources have given kind of that with an asterisk, and they've said that the 35-ish% IPC gain is, especially for the Granite Ridge, is potentially in a theoretical number. However, in real world, it doesn't actually achieve this simply because of bandwidth constraints. Now, that's one of the big differences between Zen 5 and Zen 6. AMD are doing a lot for Zen 6 to basically just, well, let's just say solve the bandwidth constraints. I will be very interested to see how Zen 5 X3D chips do. At the end of the day, of course, if you have the V cache, yes, it does add a crap ton of additional cache on the chip, but it's not the same thing as, let's say, doubling the amount of memory bandwidth or something like that. Obviously, I'm somewhat exaggerating, but you get the idea. There's limits basically on how much data you can store in the cache. So it's going to be, I'll be very interested to see what happens. But one thing I can tell you guys, regardless of whether or not Zen 5 is like 20% or 30% or 40% or whatever IPC gain, I personally think right now is a really bad time to buy like a higher end CPU or GPU with the Blackwell stuff. So let me know your thoughts and opinions. Are you holding out? With that said, I'm going to let you all go. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.